Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militanyena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Dandavat pranams to all the assembled Vaishnavas. We're having our Friday Bhagavad Gita gathering, and we're coming to the end of chapter 2, right? And we went through this famous verse, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya dehinaha rasarajam prasopyasya param drishtva nivartate, sometimes known as the higher taste shloka, which discusses this important point of Vaishnavism, right? And the practice of bhakti, that the emphasis is less on artificial restraint of the senses than it is on trying to cultivate our attachment and attraction towards the Lord and everything of the upper world. So this is we could say, a central principle in the practice of Krishna consciousness. So it's a very helpful verse. The embodied being may renounce the sense objects, but the taste for them remains. But that too vanishes for the man of wisdom by his vision of the Supreme. Okay. And Arjuna was also just asking, just so we have a bit of a recap, right? Arjuna was also asking about what is known as the stita pragya, the person who is fixed in spiritual intelligence. Arjuna was asking about the characteristics of such a person. And so Krishna was discussing that. One who's undisturbed by sorrow, has no hankering for pleasure, free from attachment, fear, and anger, and has no attachment to anything in this world, does not enjoy or resent auspiciousness or inauspiciousness. And this very nice analogy of a tortoise. I really like this analogy of tortoise that has its limbs retracted, and held within the shell. So a person of controlled senses, they can manage their senses like that, right? They have awareness of them, but they're not controlled by them. They can engage them and withdraw them at will, right? This is real freedom. Right? Srila Sridhar Maharaj had that expression, right? Freedom of the senses or freedom from the senses? Like, what constitutes real freedom, right? That's a question, especially in our modern world today, where the concept of freedom is so widely celebrated. And it is such a wonderful and great thing, but we have to question what it is, right? What is real freedom, actually? So here, this charming analogy is given. It's a nice meditation. Okay, so we can, and Krishna is acknowledging it's not easy, right, to control these senses of ours, but through devotion, ultimately through the process of devotion, by dedicating themselves to the Lord, it is possible. And I think this is where we left off. So I'll pick up with our audio recording here.
तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता ध्यायतो विषयान् पुंस संगस्ते सुपजायते संगात् संजायते काम कामात् क्रोधोऽभिजायते क्रोधात् भवति सम्मोहः सम्मोहात् स्मृतिविभ्रमः स्मृतिभ्रंशात् बुद्धिनाशो बुद्धिनाशात् प्रणश्यति रागद्वेष विमुक्तैस्तु विषयानिन्द्रियैश्चरन् आत्मवश्यैर्विधेयात्मा प्रसादम् अधिगच्छति प्रसादे सर्वदुःखानां हानिरस्योपजायते प्रसन्नचेतसोऽध्यासो बुद्धिः पर्यवतिष्ठते नास्ति बुद्धिरयुक्तस्य न चायुक्तस्य भावना न चा भावयता शांति अशांतस्य कुतः सुखम् इंद्रियाणां हि चरतां जन्मनोऽनुविधीयते तदस्य हरति प्रज्ञां वायुर्नाममिवाम्भसि तस्माद् यस्य महाबाहो निगृहीतानि सर्वथा इंद्रियानिन्द्रियार्थेभ्यस्तस्य प्रज्ञा प्रतिष्ठिता या निशा सर्वभूतानां तस्यां जागर्ति संयमी यस्यां जागृति भूतानि सा निशा पश्यतु मुनेः आपूर्यमानमचल प्रतिष्ठं समुद्रमाप प्रविशन्ति यद्वत् तद्वत् कामाजं प्रविशन्ति सर्वे सा शान्तिमाप्नोति न कामकामी विहाय कामान् यः सर्वान् पुमांश्चरति निःस्पृहः निर्ममो निरहङ्कारः स शान्तिमधिगच्छति एषा ब्राह्मी स्थितिः पार्थ नैनं प्राप्य विमुच्यति स्थित्वा स्यामन्तकालेऽपि ब्रह्म निर्वाणमृच्छति। इति श्रीमहाभारते शतसाहस्रां संहितायां वैयासिकां भीष्मपर्वणि श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासु उपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे सांख्ययोगो नाम द्वितीयोऽध्यायः।
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the second chapter. Jai Shri Gurudev. And let's see some key verses here. You know, first of all, the first few verses. Oh, welcome, Nazar. Happy you can join us today. There's this sequence here which is described, right? Because Krishna is describing the process of becoming free from the influence of the senses, right? But he's also acknowledging it's difficult to attain that freedom. And he's describing, he's kind of like breaking down this process of how our absorption in the senses can play out, right? And so, and how, and ultimately how this can lead to different consequences, right? So here, verse 62, one whose thoughts dwell on the objects of the senses becomes attached to them, right? So this is the first point, right? And we were mentioning last week, I think, how Srila Sridhar Maharaj, when he was speaking about this, he quoted that expression, nip it in the bud, right? When you start to see that your mind is dwelling too much on something unnecessarily that's not healthy, right? Then just cut it. Because the more that you allow your mind to indulge in that unnecessary thought, the more you're going to become entangled with it, the more this attachment will develop, and that will lead to all these other consequences. So it starts with this, just thinking too much, right, about the objects of the senses. And of course, this can play out in more subtle ways within ourselves, right? It may not be directly related to objects of the senses. It could be different mental patterns and so on. But anyhow, so one whose thoughts dwell on the objects of the senses becomes attached to them. From attachment, desire is born, and from desire, anger arises. So why is that? How does anger come out of this? Because when you have desire, when you have strong desire for something, then when that desire is interrupted, right? When you cannot fulfill that desire, or when you're separated from the fulfillment of that desire, you become angry, right? That's the result of that. And we can also just isolate this one phrase here, which I find quite helpful. Sangat sanjayate kama. Through association of something, calm desire. So whether that's a mental association, can also be a physical association. But when we have some extended association with something, then it's natural that desire for attachment for it will start to develop. And so we need to be aware of that, right? How we are mentally associating and also physically associating with something, because this whole sequence can follow as a result of that. If we let it, if we let it, flow within us without any restriction, the raw flow of the mind, right, can lead us to all kinds of consequences. Then verse 63, anger gives rise to delusion, and the power of delusion causes forgetfulness. Forgetfulness destroys the intelligence, and when the intelligence is lost, one loses all. So then there's no hope, right? When you get to that point, right? You cannot hear advice, right? You cannot listen to reason. You're just lost, and anything and everything can happen. And you will have to suffer as a result of that, ultimately, as well as those around you. Verse 64, but the integrated person who can control his mind at will, and who, free from attraction and repulsion, accepts his worldly necessities through his controlled senses, attains tranquility. So this is the approach of the true yogi, right? That they're not rejecting the senses or the objects of the senses, but they're focused on what is simply necessary for their maintenance, and in a detached way, accepting that through the instrument of their senses. And this is also tied in, we can say, with the principle of yukta vairagya, right? This was a principle that was established by the Goswamis of Vrindavan, and which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur emphasized quite a lot in his preaching. It was one of the main principles, you could say, of the Gaudiya Math, and how it did things, how it ran, how the preaching mission was run. That we are neither exploiting nor renouncing the environment, but we are using everything happily in the service of the Lord. Right? And so this is how we can try to regulate, right, our activities and the way that our mind is allowed to roam. Like, we try to regulate it in this way, like what is actually helpful, necessary, and required. I'll take that much, not more, not less. And if we can do that, we won't incur any karma. That's one thing. But most importantly, we're creating a favorable environment in our consciousness for the cultivation of Krishna consciousness, right? Where we're trying to focus more and more on the higher interest, the Lord's interest, the devotee's interest, and detaching from our own various layers of self-interest. And this is it's easy to sit and talk about these things. Of course, it's actually a major process in practice, right? To actually, be able to live like this, live in our heads, right? And live in the worlds with this type of consciousness. It's not a small thing, actually. But just discussing it and just becoming more aware, right? That's a huge step forward. We can't, we shouldn't underestimate the value of that. We should not discount the value of that. So, and this is something that will naturally happen, right? That this awareness will develop within us, and we will see how we're going this way and that way, and how much that selfish interest is there, how much Krishna interest is there. This awareness will develop within us more and more. And we may or may not be able to change that, or to some extent, no doubt, we'll keep it within some, realm of reason. But just to be aware of it, that is a great step forward. And to have some earnest desire to become that, right? To step into that, to grow into that. That's also a very wonderful aspiration to have. So going on to 65, when one attains a peaceful heart, all his sorrows are dispelled. The tranquil person's wisdom swiftly becomes steadfast. Did you want to add anything on that point, Titi? No?
No. It's
fine. A person bereft of self-control can have neither wisdom nor meditation. Without meditation, there is no peace, and without peace, where is the hope for happiness? As a boat on the ocean is thrown off course by an unfavorable wind, similarly, the wisdom of a person lacking self-control is carried away by even one of the roaming senses that the mind might follow. Another nice analogy. I'm really starting to appreciate all of these wonderful analogies. And I'm sure we all have experience of this, right? That how the eye can draw us one direction, the nose in another direction, the ears in another direction. And we may be focused and fixed in some particular task or thought process, but suddenly the senses can just like capture us and snatch our minds away. Therefore, O subduer of the enemy, one whose senses are fully withdrawn from their objects is a person of firmly established wisdom. And now here we come. This is one of the well-known verses of Bhagavad Gita, Yanisha Sarvabhutanam. Very, very nice verse, very helpful verse, beautiful meditation. Yanisha, we can chant this verse. Yanisha Sarvabhutanam Tasyam Jagarti Samyami Yasyam Jagati Bhutani Sanisha Pashuto Munhe. That which is day for the self-controlled sage is night for all beings. And that which is day for all beings is night for the sage who sees. And then in parentheses, we have the living beings absorbed in mundane life are asleep to the spiritual joy of the realized soul, who remains indifferent to their quest for the pleasures of the senses, devoid of spiritual joy. So such is our condition, right? Such is our condition. There's that nice line in Bhagavatam, right? The viparya yo smriti, right? Viparya yo smriti. It's like the opposite. We're seeing everything the opposite. So welcome, Ananta Shesh Prabhu. So the realized soul, they are awake in the world of Atma and Paramatma, right? So that is like daytime to them. And this world of the senses, it is like night in the sense that it has no meaning for them, right? It's a non-existence for them. So they are asleep to that in a sense. And for us, for the conditioned souls, it is just the opposite, right? That we are active in what is actually a dark world. That is like our day. We are active in that dark world. We find so many things of interest in what is actually a meaningless reality. And we also don't have real view of that higher world of spirit. So that is like nighttime to us. It's inaccessible to us in our present condition. We can get some touch of it, right? We get some touch through, like that analogy given in Bhagavatam, right? The moonlight coming through the clouds, right? We see some light, some shimmer of light through the clouds of our conditioning, right? But we cannot see that bright, original light, shining light. So it is just the opposite. Awake in the world of the senses, asleep to spiritual truth, spiritual reality. And for the enlightened soul, it is just the opposite. And that was something that we could experience tangibly in the person of Srila Govinda Maharaj, and sometimes there was this stark contrast, right, between, his divine grace and where we, are situated. That he was, sometimes it was very apparent, he is awake in another world. Right? And so many insignificant, trivial things that are important to us, they're meaningless to him, Like yesterday, Suvasnidhi shared one story. One devotee brought some question to our Gurudev, asking for advice on some matter of their personal life, let's say, and with all good intentions, right? Wanting to follow Gurudev's will. But our Gurudev, he responded by saying, he said, that is your personal matter. He said, my job is to take you to Goloka Vrindavan. That's your personal matter in this world. You figure that out. I don't have any interest in that, actually. You just work it out yourself. But my mission is something else. I want to take you to Goloka Vrindavan. Let's talk about that. And I remember sometimes I remember this one occasion, one of the, Gurudev, he was quite tolerant, and some of his personal servitors, they could be a little naughty and take advantage of that tolerance. Things that Srila Sridhar Maharaj would not tolerate, things that Srila Prabhupada, Swami Maharaj would absolutely not tolerate. But Srila Govinda Maharaj was very merciful, and he tolerated many things, and so I was there. I happened to be in the room once, and our Gurudev had a refrigerator on his veranda, right, where he would stay, and that his servitors would use, for cooking for him, but sometimes they would keep their own things in there too, for themselves. And I remember one of them, they had some like special, maybe it was some cheese or some special thing that, in Calcutta is kind of precious, and the so they had their room outside, and they were cooking something for themselves, and they were very naughty. They were going back and forth to the refrigerator inside of our Gurudev's veranda. And our Gurudev, where he would sit, where his desk was, it was right by the door. You remember, in the old veranda. So our Gurudev sitting right by the door, and this servitors like going back and forth, getting things from the fridge, and cooking for themselves. It's a little naughty, in front of your guru to behave like that. And our Gurudev is just sitting there watching, this whole thing. And then at a certain point, he just said to them, "You are very busy." And this, I also see this as like classic Srila Govinda Maharaj. Like, 9 times out of 10, he wouldn't directly tell you anything. He would hint, And, you know, Subhasini and I were saying yesterday, you know, like there are so many things like he said to us that like years later we're thinking about them and like unraveling them. Like, what did he really mean by that? And it's just hitting me now, like what he was really thinking, you know. He could be very subtle in that way. And what he was doing actually is he was like giving you space, you know, to use your own free will and come to the conclusion yourself, you know, what is the best way for you, right? You know, he, you know, other times, you know, he could, you know, there would be a double meaning, you know, and you wouldn't know, you'd have to think about what he really meant, you know, like sometimes he'd use this Bengali word shadal, it means like simple. Like, so he would like sometimes call someone a simple-hearted Vaishnava. But sometimes when he said it, he meant it as a compliment, you know, like they're sincere and earnest, pure at heart. Other times he didn't mean it as a compliment. It was more like they're foolish, you know, like use your intelligence, you know. So that occasion, I thought that was a classic Srila Govinda. You were very busy, you know. He wasn't giving that person any chastisement, you know, wasn't giving them any instruction. He was just making a comment that you could interpret however you want, you know. But as far as I could tell, what he meant was, you know, pretty much what's being said in this verse, like you're very busy and active and awake in the world of the senses, right? That's not the kind of busyness that we want, right? And I also think of this other verse in Bhagavatam, our Gurudev also liked, Shota, it's fairly well known, Shotavya Dini Rajendra Nirnam Shanti Sahasrashaha. Do you know that verse?
Yeah.
It's saying that that the blind person who is asleep to the world of the soul, they find many things to engage their senses in this world, right? You know, they find so much interest for the sense of sight, sense of smell, sense of taste, the ear, and so on. The Sahasrasa, that means like thousands, is it? Thousands of engagements. Shrotavya Dini Rajendra Nirnam Shanti Sahasrashaha Apashyatam Atmatattvam Griheshu Grihan Medinam. Yeah, so they're the Atma Tattva, they're blind to the truth of the soul, right? So they're awake in this world of the senses and they're very active in that world. But ultimately, it is a world that has no real basis. It has no real foundation. So just the opposite. You know? So this verse is very, very helpful. Yanisha sarva bhutanam tasyam jagarti samyami yasyam jagrati bhutani sanisha pashuto. Hey. And sometimes we can look at ourselves in the mirror like that, right? Or pause, right? Take a pause in the engagement of our senses and mind, right? And it may also not necessarily be reflected in our activity, but how we are, you know, how our inner world is running, right? And what we are engaging our mind with, what we are prioritizing, right, as important, what we're giving mental energy to. That is all, you know, part of this as well. Okay, so we can go on to verse 70. As the ocean remains full and unchanged, though many rivers and streams enter it, the person of firmly established wisdom attains peace despite all desires entering him. But a person who nurtures desires cannot know peace. And again, we have another nice analogy here. And our Gurudev, I heard him chant this verse as well once. he appreciated this verse. Our Gurudev, actually, he knew all these verses by heart, we would hear him chant them sometimes. And I think I mentioned this in our meeting last week. One thing I appreciate in these verses here is that Krishna is describing someone who's actually living within the relativity of the senses and the mind, right? It's not that he's describing someone who has like zero conception, like completely crossed over the other side, but this is someone who's, they're still experiencing the flow of desire and the senses, but they're able to control that, right? And so in that sense, it's a very helpful reference point for us, right? That, yeah, we can't expect to become free from that immediately, but we can try to control that, to regulate it, to become aware of it, right? So here Krishna is describing this is the stita pragya, right? The person of fixed intelligence. And they're like the ocean has many rivers and streams entering into it. This person may observe different desires entering, coming and going, but they can keep them at bay, right? They can manage them. They can control them. They're not diverting, to move with the flow of this whimsical desire or that whimsical desire, or this whimsical thought or that whimsical thought, but they're maintaining the position of an observer, right? Oh, these things are going on, right? These things are going on. Yes, it's going on. Like I remember this was also Calcutta, actually. There was one local devotee. She struggled with some mental problems, but I was actually a very intelligent, educated person, nice family, but struggled with some mental problems. But she was very sincere, and very honest. And she would come and visit our Gurudev sometimes, and sometimes she would share, what she's struggling with, And I remember one time she told me, they would speak in Bengali, right? But she told me once of one of their discussions, and she was sharing what she's struggling with in her mind. And she said, at the end of it, our Gurudev simply said to her, very compassionately, he said, yes, it will continue like this for some time, And I appreciated that very much, like he didn't try and give her a quick fix or, yeah, yes, he didn't try and give her a solution or give her a whole lecture about controlling her mind. He was just compassionately saying, yes, it's normal, it will continue, just tolerate it. And to some extent that is what we have to do, right? Sometimes that is the best that we can do. Just become a patient observer, right, of our own inner processes. We can, as we were discussing recently, right, we can't delete that algorithm right away. It has to phase out, needs some time to phase out, right? And so in the meantime, there must be some patience, that daryat we were discussing, right? Rupa Goswami gives that advice, daryat. There must be some spirit of patience, perseverance, and determination, to stick it out, no matter what. Verse 71, only a person who lives his life abandoning all desires, hankering, ego, and possessiveness can know real peace, right? So that's a simple statement, but there's so much that is there, right? There's so much that is there. What is the key to real happiness? Not checking all those boxes on your list, right? Of getting this and getting that, or doing this or doing that. But to come to that point of not wanting those things, right? That's real happiness, not feeling the need for those things, not being in that mindset of, oh, if I get this, I'll be happy, right? If I can do that, I'll be happy. But to enter that state of being able to let go of those things and move within, then you're beginning a real movement that will result in real peace and real happiness. So there's so much in this one sentence here. And the last verse of this chapter, O Partha, this is realization of the absolute, attaining which a person is freed from the delusion of mundane existence. Even at the time of death, only a momentary attainment of this state leads one to the divine abode. Wow. Didi, you want to share any thoughts on the verses we've read? Do you want to have a look?
No, I just want to ask you, says what he means by this is the realization of the absolute? What is this?
This is realization of the absolute. Esha, actually the Sanskrit is literally saying Esha Brahmi Stiti. So that would translate as being situated in Brahma, right? Situated in Brahman. So to be in Brahman consciousness.
Spirit conscious. I mean, to be like
Brahma Jnani, I suppose you could also say, right?
Not living in the plane of the senses, but living in that plane of the Atma, like that.
Yeah. Esha Brahmi Stiti. So everything I've just described, this is someone who is in spiritual consciousness, you could also say, in a simple sense, right? Vimuyati. Na vimuyati. And this person will be free from worldly muyati. Muyati is referring to like bewilderment, right? So they will be free from bewilderment of, caused by the material energy. But this is very encouraging. Only a momentary attainment of this state can, at the time of death, can lead one to the divine abode. So we've just come to the end of chapter 2. Quite a key chapter, right, as we mentioned before, because it more or less gives an overview of all of the topics of Bhagavad Gita. And on top of that, it also gives the key teachings of Atma Tattva Gyan, right? So the nature of the soul, the nature of the true self. This is established at the beginning of this chapter and sets the foundation for the whole book, makes everything relevant. This whole discussion is only relevant if you appreciate the fact that we are eternal souls, right? So that's established at the beginning of this chapter, and that's the foundation of the rest of Bhagavad Gita, right? And this chapter is also marking the moment of surrender, right? Arjuna's surrender to Krishna. Because Krishna doesn't force anything on anyone, right? And Suvasini and I were discussing this earlier, right? Like how much space Krishna gives around all of his instructions. Like there's like no dogmatism at all. There's no like heavy-handedness. Like he's very gently, it's almost like making suggestions, like he'll often say, this is what I think, this is my opinion, or like Suvasini was pointing out, he'll often give reference to other like great souls, like, oh, this is what King Janaka did, or this is what the wise people have done, right? Not saying like this is what you should do, but like this is what intelligent people do, and you can decide. And then at the end, what's the final instruction that Krishna gives? Do as you like. Yatte chashi tatakuru, right? Do as you like. You're free, right? So, Krishna only starts this when Arjuna asks him. We can also mention that. There's no unsolicited advice here. But Arjuna asked him, Arjuna surrenders to him that that's right. And that what is the right. Yeah, Shishasteham Shadi Tvam Mam Prabhu. I'm your surrendered disciple. Like, you please instruct me. And until that point, Krishna is not going to force. Krishna is actually just there as like the cab driver. Krishna is just coming humbly, affectionately to support his friend in a difficult moment. Yeah, I'll drive your chariot for you. I'll be your charioteer. That's it, He's happy just to do that. But it's only when Arjuna specifically asks Krishna, I'm realizing the limitations of my own view on things. So I'm turning to you. I'm surrendering to you. You please advise me, right? And then Krishna begins his teachings. Then it all unfolds. And then even then, consistently, Krishna's, giving his advice with affection, right? And allowing room for doubt and questions and different perspectives and all these things. So he's very affectionate, very respectful all the way through it. It's very beautiful to see. And many important verses in this chapter on the different types of yoga, on the nature of the soul, and very helpful for us in many ways. Does anyone present want to bring up any question or comment about what we've discussed today or something in the second chapter? Maybe Kirtida or Nazar want to bring up anything? Or... Otherwise, we can go on to begin chapter 3. Okay, we can start chapter 3 then. Okay. So, end of chapter 2, the constitution of the soul, from the conversation of Sri Krishna and Arjuna in Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishad, the yoga scripture of transcendental knowledge, in Bhishma Parva of Sri Mahabharata, the holy scripture revealed by Srila Vyasadeva in 100,000 verses. Okay, so the first chapter, right, it's setting the scene, right, setting the background, the context, placing you, right, because we're in the middle of Mahabharata, right, actually. So that first chapter is setting that scene. Then the second chapter, we can say, is giving an overview of all the contents of Bhagavad Gita. And then in chapter 3, then Krishna's going deeper, and he begins, with going deeper into each of the individual subject matters of Bhagavad Gita. And so he begins with karma yoga, the path of action, or more precisely, selfless. It is termed more precisely Nishkam Karma Yoga, right? Nishkam, free from desire, free from selfish desire. So selfless, the path of selfless action. So Krishna is going to go more deeply into that subject matter in this chapter. Okay. So we can hear a few verses here from our Gurudev. Let's find chapter 3.
Oh, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Sri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Oh, wait.
Hare Rama
Maybe I could.
Rama Hare Hare.
Yes, sorry, it's this one.
Srimad Bhagavad Gita Dhaya Shankha Yoga Sanjaya Uvacha Tang.
It's not playing. Not very good.
Tritiyodhaya Karma Yoga Arjuna Uvacha Jayasi Chit Karmanaste Mata Buddhir Janardana Tatking Karmani Nighore Mang Niyo Jayasi Kesava Vyamisrena Vakyena Buddhi Mohaya Shiva Me Tadekang Bada Nishchitta Jena Sreyo Hamapnuyam. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Lokesmini Dividha Nishtha Pura Prokta Mayanagha Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam Na Karmana Manarambha Naiskarmam Purusosnute Na Cha Sannasana Deva Siddhing Samadhigacchati Nahi Kaschit Kharmapi Jatu Trishthatta Karmakrit Karyate Chavasa Karma Sarva Prakriti Joir Gunai Karmendriyani Sangjamma Jaste Manasa Smaran Indriyarthan Vimurhatma Mithacharas Sauchate Justindriyani Manasa Niyamyaravate Rijuna Karmendriyai Karma Yoga Vasakta Savisishate Niyatang Kuru Karmatang Karma Jayucha Karmana Sarira Yatra Pichate Na Prasiddhe Da Karmana Jagyathat Karmano Natra Lokoyam Karma Bandhana Tadartham Karma Kaunteya Mukta Sangha Samachara Sahajagya Prajasrishtva Purovacha Prajapati Anina Prasavishaddham Mesha Bhustishta Kamadhu.
Okay. So we can maybe at least go through these translations and then we can have more discussion in our next meeting. So beginning chapter 3, Karma Yoga, the path of action. Arjuna said, O Janardhan, O Keshava, if you consider wisdom superior to action, why then do you urge me to engage in the violence of warfare, right? So fair enough, it's a good question, right? It seems contradictory. Krishna has been speaking about this Stita Pragya, right? Who's, person fixed in spiritual consciousness, fully detached from the senses. And simultaneously, Krishna is telling him to fight in this battle. It appears contradictory. I am confused by your words. They appear to be ambiguous, sometimes supporting action and sometimes supporting wisdom. So please tell me which is the most beneficial path for me to take. the Supreme Lord said, "O sinless one, I have described the two paths to be found in this world. The yoga of wisdom practiced by the realized, and the yoga of selfless action practiced by those active in the world. Both paths touch the beginnings of devotional practice, since the ladder to the plane of devotion is one, while the practice is twofold according to the stage attained. One cannot attain freedom from action by refraining from action, nor can one attain fulfillment by renunciation alone. No one can refrain from activity for even a moment. Everyone is impelled to act by the modes of material nature. Thus, the person of impure consciousness should not disregard scripturally prescribed purificatory works. One who externally restrains his hands, legs, and other senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, is a fool. Know him to be a hypocrite. O Arjuna, superior is one who, though married, has stabilized his senses by the mind and engaged in the yoga of selfless action. Perform your prescribed duties, since to be active is better than idleness. Inactive persons cannot even maintain their existence. By giving up fruit of action and performing your obligatory duties, your heart will be purified. Surpassing the plane of renunciation, you will attain pure devotion, transcendental to the mundane plane. And now this is quite a well-known verse, is Yagyartat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. Selfless duty performed as an offering to the Supreme Lord is called yagya, or sacrifice. O Arjuna, all action performed for any other purpose is the cause of bondage in this world of repeated birth and death. Therefore, remaining unattached to the fruits of action, perform all your duties in the spirit of such sacrifice. Such selfless action is the way to begin devotional practice, gradually realize the presence of the Lord, and ultimately attain pure devotion, transcendental to the modes of material nature, nirguna bhakti. In the beginning, Lord Brahma manifested the progeny of the world along with sacrifices. He instructed them thus: take shelter of this religious principle of sacrifice, prosper and flourish. May such sacrifice be the bestower of the things you desire. Okay, well, there's quite a lot here in these 10 verses we just went through. And I think we can pause here, we can meditate on this, and then next week we can have some discussion, unpack these verses. Okay, we'll close our screen share. All right. Very happy to be going through this with all of you. Great to see you, Chaitanya Doya. All right. Any last comments from anyone? Should we close our Subhasini Ji? Any last thoughts?
Anything to add?
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for your good company today. Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Okay. See you all next time. Jai Shri Gurudev.